Hi, everyone. Dom Famularo here. This is absolutely fantastic to be rejoined again. Mapex All Access. And today is an educator spotlight, which is part of a series of having top players who are also great educators, who are authors of books and have been dedicated their time into studying this art form well. And today we have none other than Steve Fidyk. Steve, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, Dom, so great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to see you again and to talk to some of the Mapex faithful about some of my favorite drum set exercises and things that I like to do in my own practice, as well as share with my students.
There are so many things we want to talk about in the process that we can have. So in the dialogue, and we've got a great overhead shot so we can see your hands at this look. We've got a great front shot. So I want to get into a variety of different things. First of all, I want people to understand that this is going to be involved with, I'm going to go by and pull a banner up here. This is so fantastic that we have here. This is lessonsquad.com/Steve-Fidyk. And this is about Lesson Squad as an educational, service that is bringing so many drummers together to Lesson Squad to learn the craft. And that's something which Mapex is proud to be involved with at a very high level. And what we're going to do is, in the course of this event, as we're speaking and sharing our ideas here, Stephen, what you're doing, we're going to offer 3 free lessons through Lesson Squad. And what people will do is they can ask, questions for sure on this chat that we have going on. But Steve will mention certain things. There'll be 3 questions at the end. You'll go to lessonsquad.com. You'll go to this site that I just showed you here, and you'll type in your answers for those 3 questions. And everyone that answers that, Steve will choose. You'll win a free lesson. And this will be fantastic to have the ability of being able to have Lesson Squad show you what it's all about and have some attention with Steve. Now, Steve also has a website that's available. You can go to by here and check this out. So we've got tons of stuff to share with you. So, Steve, let's just start talking about, you are an author of 3 great books. The books are about big band drumming. So at some point, I'd like to schedule a different session with you on big band drumming. But today, I wanted to do more of an overview of just your studies and what you share and what you give to everybody when you're teaching. And we've got your pad here. We've got drums here. So let's just start, first of all, by talking about just what you would show a student when it comes to general control. Where do you start from there?
Well, with a student that's lacking control on the instrument, usually it boils down to simplicity trumping complexity. So what I usually do is I try to break the instrument apart into individual sounds. Just like a student that would work in elementary school or middle school on a snare drum and work on their handholds and their grips, working on a single plane. So if a student is having difficulty with accepting the rebound and allowing the stick to naturally rebound back to the position that you threw it from. I mean, that's really the secret to longevity in drumming. That's why great drummers like Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson and Jim Chapin and Joe Morello and so many great drummers are able to play for so many decades, is that they allow the stick to do the work. So simply throwing the stick down to the surface and accepting that rebound, that's number one. So holding the stick only as tightly as you need to in order to express yourself musically on the drums and on the cymbals. I also like to explain to them that in your practice, which ultimately leads to performance. So everything you do leads to performance. So when you practice, you should practice with that mindset. This instrument is all about confidence. When you're hired to play music with musicians, you're being hired because you're a confident individual. They know that you can get the job done. You'll be on time. You'll actually be early for the gig. You'll know the music. You'll be prepared. And that you will deliver to a very high standard. And, the drummer in the band, it's the heartbeat of the band. So if the drummer's right and everyone's locking into the pulse that you're creating on the instrument, then the band has a chance to groove, has a chance to swing, has a chance to move from point A to point B. But, back to your original question, each of these sounds is its own leading tone. It should have its own magnetism. So, If you're playing music from the 1930s or 1940s, for example, then you're going to spend a lot of time on the hi-hat. So you have to develop a sound. You have to develop a rapport on the hi-hat. You know, music after 1950, the beacon is the ride cymbal, swinging on the ride cymbal. So really developing a pulse and a rapport and a sound, a personal sound with the ride cymbal, personal sound with the hi-hat, personal sound on your bass drum, being able to control each one of these sounds so that together, when you put it all together, you have a groove, you have a pulse. The most important rhythm we play as drummers is the quarter note. It's the rhythm that the conductor or the band leader counts off, and we protect that rhythm from bar one to the very end. So no matter what you're playing, no matter what type of music you're playing, what style, what subdivision, what time signature, that quarter note pulse is absolutely essential. So control. Here's a great control exercise I love working on. It's the first thing I do. You know, it all starts with the snare drum. You're only going to play the drum set as well as you play the snare drum. So creating an even and consistent sound hand to hand on one surface, right? Before you move it on to this multiple percussion instrument that Max Roach called a multiple percussion instrument, the drum set. So it starts with, in triplet form, 2 bars of each sticking, starting with singles, right hand lead, doubles, right hand lead, paradiddles, then this sticking. Right, left, left, followed by right, right, left. So I'll demonstrate it on the pad first, then I'll move it on to the drum. Okay. Here it is. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so getting it first even and consistent on a drum pad, right? Trying to go for tone and making sure that each stroke sounds like you're playing it with one hand. That's key. Then you move it on the snare drum. Okay, same exercise. Singles, doubles, paradiddles, right, left, left, right, right, left. And I'm feathering the bass drum. So I'm playing the bass drum very, very softly for pulse, okay? So I'm trying to get an even and consistent sound hand to hand so that when I'm moving around the instrument, I'm orchestrating rhythm. I'm trying to create that same concept of balance of sound. David Garibaldi is a wonderful example of a drummer who does this in a funk setting, right? Between the hi-hat and the snare drum when he's playing time. Always having a sense of balance between the sounds that you're using. So that's a really fun control. That's a really fun control study that you can work on in triplets. Trying to keep everything even and consistent,
So in this process, Steve, you know, when someone understands the level of control, you learn this by studying with Morello for many, many years, as I did also back in the early 70s for me and the 80s for you. Going back and really having these masters explain to us, Morello, Chapin, and being able to watch players like Max Roach and Elvin and all these phenomenal drummers. So what was it about, you know, your teachers that you had that kind of opened up a wider understanding of control for you?
Well, the teachers that I had standards. You know, they had very, very high standards,
Yeah.
and they didn't try to do everything. Joe's a good example of someone who focused on control exercises, hand development exercises from stick control, accents and rebounds, both written by George Lawrence Stone, and his own book, Master Studies and Master Studies 2. When I was studying with Joe in the 80s into the 90s, all the exercises that are in Master Studies 2 were exercises that he was giving me in lessons. So I got a chance to really work through those exercises before they went to print. But before I studied with Joe, I studied with Ed Soph. When Ed Soph was teaching in New Haven, Connecticut, before he started working at the University of North Texas. And he was the person that suggested that I go study with Joe, because he was leaving the East Coast to go down to Denton. And he said, you know, who you're going to study with, you need to continue this. You know, you really are interested in this art form, you're interested in music, you're interested in learning, you're inspired, you have a good hard work ethic, you know, you want to go for it, you know, keep doing it, go study with Joe. But even before that, you know, working in my undergraduate work at Wilkes University with Robert Novak, you know, learning all the orchestral instruments, learning xylophone and marimba and concert snare drum and all of the orchestral percussion instruments, and playing recitals on those instruments was extremely helpful. And my first teacher, Angelo Stella, in the town I grew up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, was very encouraging at a very young age. I was 7 years old when I started to take lessons. And so he would work on really basic things from stick control, but also teach the rudiments. You know, he always said the rudiments were the scales of the drums. And so he would show me a rudiment every week or every 2 weeks when I would have a lesson. And then he would play piano at every lesson. So when he taught me a beat, he would go over on the piano and he would count me in, and it was like playing duo with my drum teacher on piano. He was on piano, I was on drums. So, you know, having teachers that were encouraging, but helped me in very, very specific areas of development. And those teachers that you mentioned, Dom, in addition to Morello, Jim Chapin, Henry Adler, Maurice Spivak, all these wonderful teachers, you know, they didn't teach style like drummers today teach. You know, they didn't go down the rabbit hole of, you know, teaching jazz style or funk style or anything like that. They taught how to create a sound, how to create a leading tone on the drums, working on your hands, working on your endurance, and then play the music that you hear. At the first lesson I took with Joe, he mentioned to me, he said, look, I'm 40 years older than you are, Steve. So the music that you're into, I'm probably not going to be into. And the music that I'm into, you probably never even heard of, which wasn't true, but you know, that's what he said to me. And he said, so what I'm about to show you, you could use with any type of playing, any style of playing. And he had students that went on to play with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps, Woody Herman's big band, you know, show work in New York, you name it. So I think that's really important too, to try to empower the student to believe in themselves and give them the tools for self-expression with the music that they're hearing.
Well, interesting point, Steve. I think what you're saying is the fact that these great teachers, as I passed through the portals of them also, was the fact that they taught us foundation. And that foundation really helped us out to go to any style we wanted to play with, or even soloing. So talk about now about, you know, when you learn this control and what you inspire from these teachers, were there specific rudiments that they focused on with you at all that they felt was important to access and understand?
And I think it's a great rudiment to work on. If you're starting to combine two sounds on one surface, right? So that last exercise, one sound on one surface, just like the 72 single beat combinations in this classic book right here, right? In stick control. So, you know, the first 3 pages in this book, they should sound like you're playing those stickings with one hand, even though you're toggling between different sticking combinations, 72 of them. But the next step in this progression is to control the accent. So now you're bringing in 2 sounds on one surface, and the best rudiment I know to work on that, and the rudiment that was first given to me by Joe, was the paradiddle, the single paradiddle. So first, the single paradiddle on the snare drum, then orchestrated between the hi-hat and the snare drum, improvising on the bass drum. So when you're working on something new, if it's a new concept, a new rudiment, a new orchestration, maybe a transcription, try personalizing it and improvising within that structure. So when I would learn this paradiddle on the snare drum, maybe I would try orchestrating it around the toms or making a groove out of it, like you just heard. Now maybe taking that same rudiment and orchestrating it on the toms. And there's a really cool variation in this wonderful book, the Rudimental Swing Solos by Charles Wilcoxon. And actually the first solo in that book, Rolling in Rhythm, was dedicated to Morello. So it's this book here, Modern Rudimental Swing Solos for the advanced drummer. Legend has it this was a book that Philly Joe Jones used to carry around with him and practice out of religiously. And if you work on some of these variations in the front of the book, you'll hear some of the patterns that Philly Joe Jones played on recordings like Milestones, for example. But there's this really, really great Wilcoxon paradiddle study that I'd like to demonstrate for you that I like working out with. Just kind of toggles the accent, kind of shifts the accent. I'll play it slowly on the pad and then move it on the snare drum. So first it's single paradiddle with accents. Okay. Now you shift that accent to the second 16th note. Then put the double in the middle, 1. Then on the end, then on the front. So the whole progression is and on the drum, it sounds like this. So these kinds of exercises I find in my playing help me with my reflex action in the wrist. I'm a big exercise guy, not physical exercise so much. I mean, I like to go for walks and runs and things like that. But when I'm talking about exercise, I mean on the drums. I like to spend at least a half an hour to an hour each day working on some kind of exercises to keep my reflex in check, my hands. And that was really important over the pandemic because we all went through a large break in playing with live musicians, a year plus. And then we find ourselves in a situation where we're on a bandstand or on in a concert hall stage with socially distanced musicians and plexiglass and minimal monitors, musicians 6 to 10 feet apart. And so it's really important to keep your reflex, your physical reflex going so that when you're in that situation, you can really lock in the quarter note and try to bring everyone to your beat. So having that kind of magnetism in your beat pattern, it helps to have a reflex, right? And it also helps to have a mental reflex for the music you're trying to make, right? So we're always working on trying to develop the mechanical side through exercise so that when we sit down and play, We can play the ideas in the moment. When we're hearing something that's going on in the bandstand, if we feel we can contribute to the conversation, we have the reflex to do it. We also have the mental reflex. We can flex our muscle, our brain, to be able to play that style in a way that inspires the other musicians. So yeah, so that's a really, I think, a really great exercise, the Wilcoxon paradiddle study, along with all those solos in that book.
You mentioned, Steve, about Philly Joe Jones. I had the chance of knowing Philly Joe Jones and meeting him backstage.
Wow.
And yes, he opened up the Wilcoxon book, and on the same pad, he'd hand you a pair of sticks, and we'd play along to it. I know Virgil Donati was there sometimes doing it also in our younger days.
Wow.
And Philly would just cut through this like a hot knife through warm butter, leaving us in the dust, completely trying to find out where the hell we were. So great book. So now you mentioned Stick Control, of course, George Lawrence Stone, the author. What about Buddy's favorite rudiment?
For those that are new to the rudiments, right? If you're new to the rudiments, it's okay. They're not hard. Ed Sof used to always say this in lessons. When you were having trouble, struggling, working on something in a lesson, he would show you something. He would be able to demonstrate it, no problem. Then you would be working on it and stumbling on it, and you get discouraged, and you say, look, it's not hard, it's just new to you. So if any of these concepts are new to you, just be patient with yourself, slow them down, work them with a metronome, right? Or work them with a recording, right? Or work them without a recording and without a metronome and count out loud, right? Because when you're playing with a band, it's not like playing with a play along. When you're playing with a play along, everything is quantized to the click track and everything's perfect. But when you're playing with a band, depending on the experience level of the musicianship on the bandstand, someone has to lift the anchor, as Jake Hanna would say, and drive on and make sure that the time is protected. So sometimes playing with a bass player that's not really strong, or a guitar player that's not really strong, or a keyboard player, horn player, someone has to take the responsibility of owning the time. But the six-stroke roll, Buddy Rich's favorite rudiment. And Philly Joe used the six-stroke roll too. And I'll show you an exercise out of stick control that you can work on. But here's the accent structures, right? So you could play it in triplet form. One. So that's on the front end of the rudiment. It's a 6-note rhythm. Right, left, left, right, right, left. Right, left, left, right, right, left, left. And the thing is, you could phrase it in a duple form, or you could phrase it in the triplet form. So here it is in duple form. So that's in duple form with the samba bass drum pattern. Played it on the hi-hat, then played it on the snare drum. But you can also play it in triplet form. So 2 8th note triplet groupings with the sticking right, left, left, right, right, left. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. So now on the drums, putting the accents on the toms. And if you want to work on that, you could take it out of stick control. Stick control, page 5. Just reading the stickings. Just reading the stickings. When you see a right sticking, from stick control, play an eighth note triplet, right, left, left. When you see a right sticking. When you see a left sticking, play right, right, left, with an accent on the left. So if we skip to number 13, which is 4 rights and 4 lefts, it would be 4 beats of right, left, left, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, 1. It's called the 6-stroke roll exercise because number 1, when you apply this application, this sticking application, just reading the stickings, it becomes a 6-stroke roll. So it'd be right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Right is right, left, left with an accent on the first note. A left sticking is right, right, left. So what you do in your practice log is, well, first you keep a practice log. That's really important so that you have an understanding of what you're working on, what tempos you're working on them. And then you can access these practice logs later in life when you're teaching. I still access my practice logs from Ed Soph and Morello and Kim Plainfield and all the teachers that I've had. But just right in there, this is the key. When you see a right sticking from stick control, eighth note triplet, right, left, left with an accent over the first right. You see a left, eighth note triplet grouping with the sticking right, right, left under that. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. So you go from number 1 to number 2, right? Number 3 to number 4. And a lot of these patterns are patterns that you would hear Philly Joe playing.
Absolutely.
You
Steve,
know,
if you would, Steve, a couple of things. Well, first of all, those that are listening, I want you all to, if you have a question that you want to type in, bring the question into Steve right now. I can pull you in from the chat, and make notes of all this here because there'll be some questions at the end that Steve's going to request for you to get a free lesson with Steve on the lesson squad. So, Steve, if you would just slow that down, look at number 1 in stick control, and just slow it down. I'm going to put the overhead cam on. Actually, people can see it here. Slow it down where they can see the right, left, left. And the right, right, left. Just slow it down so they can understand more of what that 6-stroke roll is about.
Okay, so number one sticking is right, left, left. So you see the single right. When you see a single right, you're going to play right, left, left. And when you see a single left, you would play right, right, left. So when you read the first 2 stickings of number 1, right, left, it would become 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So it becomes a 6-stroke roll, really. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So right, left, 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 left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. That's number 2. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Number 3, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. Number 4, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right. And because there's combinations of singles and doubles, you can really move the pattern along. And it flows. It has a flow to it. It has a legato flow. So when you're working on your jazz style, when you're working on jazz playing, that's really what you're trying to go for. You're trying to go for a tone, and you're trying to go for a sense of flow within the triplet rhythm. So that's why it's nice, because it's triplets. So number one, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, right. Number three, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, 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 right, right, left, left, right. Paradiddle would be right, left, right, right, left, right, left. So the accents become melodic. They become melodic. And I'll demonstrate a few of them on the drums. I'll read down the column.
Can you see this link that I have up there, Steve? If you look at it, from Ken Murphy. Ken, thank you so much. He kind of clarified what it is.
My man Ken.
And he put up there a capital right.
Ken's over in Detroit. Ken's over in Detroit. He's an old buddy of Chad Smith. Old buddies with Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. A great drummer in his own right. Ken Murphy. Great.
Ken is absolutely fantastic. Ken, thanks for joining us.
That's it. That's it, Ken. So here it is on the drums. The six-stroke roll, Buddy Rich's favorite rudiment. You know, Dom, this is like kind of a newer setup for me. I'm usually more of a one up, one down guy. You know, when I play, all the years I played with the Army Blues with the big band, I'm usually like one tom on top, one tom on the floor, just like a four-piece kit. But you know, I'm in the middle of a recording project, and it's more contemporary. The sound is and the music is more contemporary. So I decided, you know, I'm going to go outside of my comfort zone and add this extra tom on my bass drum. These great Mapex Saturn 4 kit, 8x10, 9x12, 16x16 floor tom, a 16x20-inch bass drum, walnut, maple, hybrid shells. They just feel warm, but they're snappy too. They project and they're warm all in the same bar. And so. But sometimes, you know, going outside of your comfort zone, that's what learning is all about, you know, making yourself vulnerable. In order to develop, I think it's a good thing to step outside of your comfort zone, trying to learn a new style of playing or working with musicians that you're not accustomed to playing with, or going to a jam session if you have limited jazz skill, and just jump into the deep end of the pool and try. You know, you learn through your failures. It's just very, very simple, really. I mean, you'll never forget when you fail. You know, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you keep moving forward, you know?
Absolutely. That's a point well taken. So talk about some practicing ideas. You know, what someone can apply when they get to the kit. What ideas do you have that you teach with your students that they can practice along to?
Well, I love taking rudiments. I love taking rudiments and applying them into different styles, in addition to working on stick control or syncopation. You know, I like to use old methods. I love to use old methods. You know, taking, say, for example, the 5-stroke roll, right? Taking the 5-stroke roll. Working on coordination. 5-stroke roll. You could put the rights on the bass drum and the lefts on the snare drum. So, 5-stroke roll. 2, 4, 5. 2, 4, 5. So taking rudiments and trying to be creative with them. 5-stroke roll, normally play duple. You could try phrasing it in a triplet form. So taking that 5-stroke roll, putting the rights on the bass drum and the lefts on the snare drum. Two, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5. And then adding the ride cymbal swing beat with the hi-hat on 2 and 4. The long roll, you could do the same thing with the long roll or any of the metered rolls. Here's the long roll, broken up between the right foot and the left hand on the snare drum. Another really great rudiment is the lesson 25, which is the compound rhythm. If you invert it, start with the accent. And that works nice if you're working on samba, to try to get the samba phrasing, that back phrasing. Also, the flamacue, which is 4/16 and a quarter note, starting with the flam, and then an accent on the E. 1 E and a 2, 3 E and a 4, 1 E and a 2, so phonetically in 2/4 time, 1 E and a 2, 1 E and a 2. So you could play that duple, 4/16 and a quarter, or you could try phrasing it in triplets. Here it is, first phrased duple and then phrased in triplet form. That's fun because it displaces the accent. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, The flam tap, if you separate the hands, is the swing ride beat. I'll play the flam tap on the snare drum, then I'll separate my hands. Right hand on the ride cymbal, left hand on the snare drum. Left hand lead, left hand lead. So if you're working on your coordination, if you're working on language, you're just trying to take these rudiments and not work them in a traditional sense in terms of open to close to open. Most students practice things one way. They may practice a book from page 1 to the end of the book. They may practice rudiments open to close to open, and then they don't revisit them. And what I like to do in my teaching and in my own practice is to work on less material, but try to come up with variations on the material that I'm comfortable with. Because when you're playing with musicians, the last person on the bandstand you really should be listening to is yourself. You work on all this stuff so that you create dynamic balance between your hands and your feet, so that when you're grooving or you're improvising, everything is balanced. If you want to bring up the ride cymbal, you have the control to do it. If you want to bring up the hi-hat, you have the control to do it. Bass drum, you name it. You're your own walking 4-channel mixer.
Steve, talk about the fact that you move so freely from your hi-hat to your ride cymbal, and we take that for granted. But in the early days, there really was no ride cymbal as it was, and that had to kind of be put into the workings of the configuration of the drum set. Talk a little bit about the history of that and who was involved with that.
Well, like at the beginning of the class, we were talking about creating a leading tone on each of these instruments. And so in addition to the snare drum, in addition to working on your ride cymbal technique away from the drums, usually when a student starts working on their coordinated independence, they jump in with all four limbs. Right foot, right hand, left hand, and they start swinging and they start working out Jim Chapin's advanced techniques for the modern drummer or syncopation. But the most important thing that the band members are listening to and for is the phrasing on the ride cymbal or on the hi-hat. And we take it for granted, we neglect it. We neglect the hi-hat sound, or we neglect the ride cymbal sound. Many younger drummers do anyway. At least, some of the students that I've had over the years, they're always trying to find a deeper pocket on the ride cymbal or on the hi-hat. And so, drummers like Joe Jones, right? Joe Jones he's Papa Joe Jones, right? He was the drummer that, along with the rest of the bassy rhythm section, helped change the feel of the beat, helped spread out the feeling of the beat, made it more loose, made it more triplet based. And he was Mr. Hi-Hat. He was the king of the hi-hat cymbals, right? Joe Jones. And so he would play, time on the hi-hat, and those arrangements in the 1930s and into the 1940s were built around the hi-hat. So the leading tone, the sound that led the band, was the sound of the hi-hat cymbal. So could you imagine playing an entire arrangement on the hi-hat cymbals along with the bass drum? And hi-hat cymbals, the stand itself wasn't even adjustable. If you go back and watch old video footage of Buddy Rich with Artie Shaw, you'll notice that the hi-hats are below the snare drum rim, because the stand wasn't adjustable. So Buddy would be playing on the hi-hats like this with the left hand over the top. And before that was the sock cymbal, and before that was the low boy, which was very, very low. Baby Dodds would play on the low boy. But Joe Jones was certainly a master hi-hat player. And when he played time on the hi-hats, he got both cymbals working. So a lot of drummers, when they play time on the hi-hat, sometimes I'll hear that from students. You want to get both cymbals constantly touching. The cymbals are constantly touching. That's your open sound. The closed sound, cymbals together. Half open sound, it's a crescendo into beats 1 and 3. So it's open, closed, crescendo, open, closed, crescendo. And it sounds like this. Now the drummer that's credited for moving that beat from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal, and there were many drummers that were doing it, Joe Jones being one of them, Dave Tuff, who played with the Woody Herman Band, did it, Sid Catlett, Shadow Wilson. But the drummer that really is credited in jazz history for doing it is Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark. So he was one of the first drummers to move that beat and play time primarily on the ride cymbal. The beat's the same. The beat's the same. But keeping time on the ride cymbal outside of the melody. So playing the melody on the hi-hats and then accompanying soloists on the ride cymbal. Any shout choruses on the ride cymbal. And then possibly back to the hi-hat for the out melody. So working on that, right? Just practicing time, maybe 8-bar phrases, practicing with the hi-hat for 8 bars, and then to the ride cymbal for 8 bars. High sounds coupled with your low sound, with the bass drum. So getting a blend, right? Drum intervals, ride cymbal, bass drum, interval. Hi-hat, bass drum, interval. And getting those sounds locked in and blended. Trying to go for a blended sound. Hi-hats are really funky. You know, they're a really funky instrument. A lot of drummers, you know, when they're practicing, they don't practice the hi-hat. They just use the hi-hat on 2 and 4 and they go right to the ride cymbal and easy, basic motives or riff comping on the snare drum. Kind of like out of John Riley's Art of Bop Drumming book. You know, that's where they start. But you could take those Art of Bop drumming rhythms that are played on the snare drum and play them underneath the hi-hat, you know. I think the first one in John's book is... So comping underneath the cymbals, or using the shoulder of the stick to come down on the cymbals on the edge, like fanning it. There's a really great video of you, Dom, doing this online. I think you made a joke about it. You said, you know, you showed up to a gig without your drums, and this is what you ended up getting. But man, all those techniques that you were using on that is kind of what I'm trying to illustrate here. Is that it's a really funky instrument. You know, you just have to be creative, spend some time with it, listen to great drummers like Kenny Clark, Joe Jones, Ray McKinley, just musicians that really worked the hi-hat cymbals and created lift within the band.
It really is. There's some great video footage on YouTube that many of the, just do the research of Max Roach performing, dedicating just Mr. Hi-Hat to Papa Joe Jones. And Papa Joe Jones, in the last few months of his life, was on the side of the stage watching. And I was there for that performance and to witness and see Papa Joe Jones watching his student Max Roach perform. There's some pretty powerful video footage to watch. And I did that at the Drumeo show. They said, Don, would you do something? So I just brought out a hi-hat and played and dedicated it to those great players to know that there are so many great sounds you can get out of that, which is what you're doing right there, Steve, which is fantastic. Thanks. Steve, we only have a few more minutes. I want to just kind of just bring in a little bit about improvisation, about the understanding of improvising and having the freedom of being able to express yourself. And I'd like you to talk about improvisation, and then I'd like you just to solo for a couple of minutes and just play. Your drums sound fantastic. The Mapex drums just sound beautiful the way they are. That you said is your Saturn 4 kit. It sounds absolutely fantastic. The setup you have with the sound that you have really is crystal clear. I think everybody else can appreciate the fact that how great it sounds.
In terms of improvisation, I mean, if there's one thing that we all learned from going through this pandemic, and we're still in it, you know, we're still in it, but you know, things are getting better. You know, I'm optimistic that things are getting better, and gigs are coming back, and there's less virtual learning and more in-person learning and just collaboration, which inspires musicians and creative types to move forward and think and try to improvise and learn from one another. I think it's important to never forget the reason you came to the instrument in the first place. It's just so much fun to sit down behind the drums and improvise. Put on a recording and play, or just sit down and you're working on these 2 or 3 ideas, whether it's something from stick control or syncopation or Will Coxon or a rudiment, and try to improvise with it. And in order to do that, it might help to put a framework around it. It might be a form. It might be like a musical form, for example. You might want to say, all right, well, I'm going to improvise over a 12-bar blues, or I'm going to improvise over a 32-bar song form. So AABA song form, a really standard song form. And so, that your phrases all line up, and everything is working out within that framework, and you're using these limited rhythms or styles within that framework. And I think if you practice that way, if you're practicing using these musical attributes and you're practicing, when you go and you play with people, you'll be more apt to sound musical. The thing is, the drum set, unlike a horn, when a horn player plays, they have to take a breath. They have to take the horn out of their mouth and take a breath. And I was at a master class one time, and I heard the great New Orleans drummer Johnny Vidakovich mention this. He said, when I play the drums, I think of the drums as if they had a mouthpiece. So, in other words, playing dynamically, playing soft, playing loud, taking breaks, taking rests within a phrase, within your groove. So, say, for example, if you're playing a blues, 12-bar blues, you may want to start by playing 12 bars at a time, 12 bars at a time as part of your solo, into 12 bars of improvising freely. So it's just a fun thing. It's a fun thing to do. It's a great way to clear your mind. If you're working on something specific, like maybe double bass drum technique or molar in the left hand or a specific groove, try to improvise within it, because when you're playing in a band, you never know when you're going to have to step up front and be featured. I mean, we're mainly accompanists. We're always trying to accompany and make the other musicians that we're playing with sound better. Always trying to lift the band and inspire the musicians. But most leaders will want to feature the drummer at some point in the band. And to me, that's the ultimate. Playing with other musicians. Being in the van or being on the bus or being in a hotel and just traveling with musicians and bands. I mean, my father was a musician from the time I was really young. I was always playing or sitting in with his band or checking out rehearsals with his band. So I've always been around bands, and it's just something that I always loved to do. I never really envisioned myself ever teaching. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy sharing my experiences musically, but I like to think of myself as someone that plays and shares my experience from the bandstand directly to the student, to try to empower the student to learn from the mistakes that I made.
Boy, Steve, well, you do that well, man, with the students that you have. And we've got on here, again, lessonsquad.com/Steve-Fidyk. I want everyone to go there and check it out and contact you. We also have 3 questions that you had mentioned here. So let's just review those 3 questions that you're going to ask, that you want people to go to the Lesson Squad, Steve-Fidyk on there, and they can respond to those 3 questions. And when they respond to them, then you'll contact them for a free lesson. So let's talk about those 3 questions.
Right. So if you go to that lessonsquad.com/Steve Fidyk, answer one of these 3 questions, I'll get back to you with a specific lesson code and you'll win a free lesson. Okay. So here's question number 1. What was Buddy Rich's favorite rudiment? What was Buddy Rich's favorite rudiment? That's number 1. Question number 2. Who wrote the book Stick Control? Who was the author of the method book Stick Control that I referenced earlier in the class? And number 3, who is credited for moving the jazz beat from the hi-hat cymbals to the ride cymbal? Who is the drummer credited for moving the jazz beat from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal? So those are your 3 questions. Direct message me at lessonsquad.com/Steve Fidyk. And, first come, first serve. I'll just go down the messages. As soon as I see the correct answer, I'll respond today with the lesson code, and we'll get the lesson scheduled, and we'll have a great time.
Fantastic. Well, this is such a great idea that Mapex All Access is doing as an educator spotlight.
Sure is.
Be able to grab someone and pull them aside and have a great sounding kit, have great knowledge to share, and then have this format where it goes live on Facebook and YouTube, and it's saved on YouTube. So we have this to go back to in reference. We can share this on social media. This really is where 21st century technology helps us in moving our art form forward. And Steve, you're right at the cusp of helping us outdo this.
Well, Dom, I appreciate the opportunity, and you're so passionate about sharing your experience and your knowledge, and you're doing these forums, and it's just so wonderful that you're giving musicians the opportunity to speak about their experience and share with the next generation. So I thank you, on behalf of Mapex, and really thank you to Jeff Mulvihill and Mark Bennett for the opportunity to represent such a wonderful brand and to share again my experiences with the next generation. I really appreciate the opportunity very, very much.
Fantastic, Steve. Boy, thank you so much. Steve, what's amazing about it is what we'll do is we'll map out another one in the future where we can focus on big band drumming. I want to talk about your books that you have. Just show, if you would, the books. I'm gonna pull the overhead over here. Just show us the books. You've got Inside the Big Band Drum Chart.
Yeah.
Which is, again, these books are absolutely excellent. You've got Big Band Drumming and At First Sight.
Yeah, I've got that here. Let's see. Here it is.
Another great book. And then the Big Band Drumming Philosophy. I think all of this is extremely...
That was co-written. This one was co-written by Dave Black as well. So it's a co-written project with Dave Black, the philosophy book.
Dave Black, who is a phenomenal, music publisher at what he does. I just saw him at the Passig show recently, and he's still actively involved in the industry and keeping it going strong, and a phenomenal drummer and educator himself, which is really fantastic. So those 3 books, everyone track them down. You can track them down. And if you have any questions on those, you can go here and find out from Steve exactly how to track the books down, for sure. Any questions you have about the product, you can go to mapexdrums.com. Again, go back to the incredible lessonsquad.com/Steve-Fidyk so you have information to track down on that. I thank everybody for joining us today. This has been fantastic to have the ability to be able to have so many people from all around the world join us in here and listen to what you're saying, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Dom. Appreciate the opportunity.